Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Gaelic Lives podcast. We're looking back at another huge weekend of club championship action right across the province, and we're going to start with probably the best club championship in the province and in the country. It's Tyrone that got up and running, and we're delighted to be joined by Alan Rodgers from Ulster Herald. And Alan, you got a good grasp of a lot of these games over the weekend, and I said it's the best championship in the country. I think that's a sentiment that's felt right throughout the country.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I suppose the thing, obviously, that makes it so special is the fact that it's playing straight knockout. If you're beat on the day, then that's you finished. And I suppose that was highlighted. Well, it was highlighted in all 8 games, but especially in the games between Eric Kieran and Arboe, Dungannon and Trillick and Donegal Galway. Now, Arboe were going into the championship on the back of a reasonably good league campaign, and they were expected maybe to challenge Eric Kieran, and maybe even some people were even talking about them winning that match. But as it happened, Eric Kieran, who of course reached the All Ireland Club final just in January there, and we're missing Peter Hart. Peter Hart got sent off in that All Ireland final. Probably making a notice of him being sent off because it was nearly right at the end, but they won very comfortably, and Arboe really challenged a wee bit in the first quarter, but after that, Errigal were just unstoppable. They ended up scoring 4 goals, and Dara Canavan and all their usual stars were on top form. So I suppose they're going to be a team that are going to have to be watched very closely as this championship progresses. There hasn't been a club has retained the Tyrone title since 2005 when Carrickmore won it. Carrickmore haven't won the title since then. So I suppose the big question is, can an Eric Kieran team, which reached the All Ireland Club final and really impressed on Thursday night in the opening game of the senior championship, whether they can ultimately go on and become the first team to retain the title in 2 decades?
Now, with a full out on Friday night, Eric Kane, obviously apart from Peter Hart, you mentioned missed out through suspensions, but did they have a full bill of health apart from that, and will they have for the rest of the campaign?
Yeah, they more or less had their full team out. Peter Oak McCartan, who had spent the summer in America, he came on as a sub, and obviously Peter Hart was missing. But apart from that, they had most of their players that would have featured in last year's championship run to Croke Park. They were all available. So it was an impressive performance from them, and one which certainly highlights their intentions and their qualities ahead of the quarterfinals now coming up in a fortnight's time.
And a few other big standout results, I suppose, Alan, just going by Twitter and social media. I didn't get seeing the game, but Trillick had a big win over Dungannon, and I think this one was one of the games of the weekend.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Like Trillick and Dungannon, it's amazing. 10 years ago, and I think I'm right in saying this, maybe 2014 or 2015, Trillick and Dungannon met in the Tyrone Intermediate final. They both obviously won promotion. Trillick won the title then the following year, 2015. Dungannon beat them in that intermediate decider. Trillick won it the following year, 2015, won the title again in 2019 and again in 2023. So both Dungannon won it in 2020. So both teams over the past decade have been, up there among the main contenders for the Tyrone senior title. They've also met on a number of occasions in the championship, and famously, obviously, in that 2020 final. They met in last year's semi-final as well. So this was, right from the draw was made, this was highlighted as probably the game of the game of the first round, and it certainly lived up to all expectations because right from the start, the intensity was amazing. There were some great scores, great tracking back, great individual performances, no less than from the likes of Paul Donaghy for Dungannon. And, Lee Brennan started a wee bit slowly, but ultimately made his mark. And the game, nobody could have complained if this game had been a draw. And for a long periods of time, coming up to the last 5 or 10 minutes, it looked like being a draw. But then Silic just got a couple of scores to go ahead, and ultimately won by 4. So they obviously reached the county final last year, lost to Argyll in that decider. And the missed obviously the late Jody Gormley was manager at that time. His memory is one that they're cherishing around. So like, and you could see a resolve within their team to really make the most of whatever opportunities present themselves in the 2025 season. Now, whether or not that results in them actually winning the O'Neill Cup, well, we'll just have to wait and see about that. But certainly, based on what we saw on Saturday night, they're going to be major contenders. Like, the reality is, both Silic and Argyll are probably the two most favourite teams. But when we talked about the state knockout nature of the Tyrone Championship, obviously Dungannon they're out of the championship today, whereas they're probably a team that would be capable of reaching a semi-final or a final under any other backdoor or side door system. So yeah, that was a real classic match, and a very enjoyable game for the large crowd that was at Carrickmore.
I suppose you mentioned at the start we talked about Argyll and Arbo. The game was expected to be a lot tighter. Alan, one of the big scorelines from the weekend was Oma obviously beating Derrylaughan 126 to 2 points. And I know Derrylaughan are only up from the one intermediate last year, but was this expected to be tighter too, or how did this end up so one sided?
Well, the reason probably that it ended up so one-sided was because Derrylaughan were missing Brian Kennedy, and they were also missing Thomas Carney. Brian Kennedy, obviously the Tyrone captain and a major influence for the Kevin Barrys at midfield. Thomas Carney suffered a serious leg injury earlier in the season, so that ruled him out. Now, in saying that, probably, Derrylaughan are already, they were already bottom of the Division One league, so they needed to win the senior championship in order to secure their survival. The only team that has ever managed to do that, I think, is probably Killyman. And Killyman, for people who may not know, is a club actually in the same parish as Dungannon, but wouldn't be, have probably punched above their weight over the years, and they were bottom of the intermediate league one year, maybe about more than 10 years ago, and ended up winning the intermediate championship. So that was the task facing Derrylaughan, but without those two players, it was probably never really going to happen. And 126 to 2 points says it all about that match. And I suppose for Oma have had a mixed league campaign. At one stage, they were down near the bottom of the table. They rallied somewhat towards the end of the league and finished in a reasonably healthy position. I don't think they're going to beat Argyll Kieran in the quarter final, but still they'll have been relieved to come past Derrylaughan. And I suppose they're a club with a fine championship tradition, and they'll fancy their chances of causing Argyll some difficulties in the quarterfinals. But I can't see them on the basis of the season as a whole. I can't see anything other than an Argyll Kieran win in that quarterfinal. But certainly for the first round, Oma will be fairly satisfied with the result and the fact that they're through from a game that at one stage might have been seen as potentially tricky.
And a few more Sunday results that sort of stand out. I suppose Eden Dark's win over Dromore 219 to 216, and Dartmoor's 324 to 124 win over Gelbly. So going by the scorelines alone on two great games there.
Yeah, well, I suppose going on the Dromore and Eden Dark game first, like Eden Dark are, people will know Eden Dark have a myriad of county stars. They've Niall Morgan, they've Con Kilpatrick, they've Darren McCurry, and they've a host of boys that have been on underage Tyrone teams over recent years. But they have never been able to sort of break that championship duck. And probably at this stage, the fact that they're playing Carrickmore now in the quarter final, that this is their big chance to maybe reach the semi final. And if they get a good draw, maybe reach the final. But their win over Dromore, like Dromore obviously were champions in 2021. They still have a lot of those players involved. They've been contenders, at a fair level over the past 4 years, and probably were expected certainly in the west of the county to make a strong challenge here and probably maybe beat Edendorf. And they were leading it in the first half. Like they led at one stage by 1-6 to not 3. But when you have players like Niall Morgan and like Darren McCurry out the field, Contra Patrick, it's going to be you're going to at some stage reach a purple patch, and that's what Edendorf did. And they won this game, and fair play to them for doing that, because it means that they're now on the verge of a semi-final of a Carrickmore team that they'll fancy their chances of beating. And for Edendorf, who have never reached the county final, have never obviously won a county title, but of this golden generation of players, that's a big thing, and it'll be very interesting to see how they get on in the last eight. And similarly with Donegal in the and that final quarter final, or the final first round tie, that was against their parish neighbours and rivals Galway. And like this is as big as it comes in terms of rivalries in Tyrone. The two are up senior now, but Donegal obviously over this past 5-6 years they've had multi-talented minor teams, and they've had multi-talented players who have come on to Tyrone sides at under 20 and minor level. Joey Clark obviously captained the under 20s to the All Ireland under 20 title obviously this year. You had Noah Grimes as well was part of that team. So this was a first test for them in the championship to see, right, can they start to maybe bring that talent, bring that ability to fruition at the highest level. Now, I'm not saying that they're gonna go on and win the O'Neill Cup in 2025. They might, who knows? But the fact that they're through to the quarter final for them will represent real progress at this stage of the year. And they play Loch McCrory in the quarter final. Loch McCrory are another team. They beat Killyclogher on Friday night, and they're a team which has really impressed over this past 3-4 years. Last year they were very unfortunate to lose to Dungannon in the quarter final. They've never reached the semi final of the Tyrone Championship before, but obviously, like Donegal, they have a whole host of young players who are coming through the ranks at county level, and now they're starting to show it at club level. So those are two clubs that will see their quarter final clash as an opportunity to get to the semi final. And you know what? When you get to the semi final and there's an open draw, anything can happen. So it's going to be a very interesting quarter final lineup in the county. And I suppose the final game then of the weekend was between Pomeroy and Gorchin, two teams who will meet in a relegation playoff at the bottom of Division 1. Pomeroy obviously have credentials, and I suppose they showed that on Friday night by beating Gorchin that they still have they still have a lot to offer in the Tyrone Championship. And like Chillick will be warm favourites going into that game, but Pomeroy, the likes of Kieran McGeary, Frank Burns, boys like that, Brendan Burns, it's going to be, they could pose difficulties. And I remember back to, I think it was 2017, and they played Killyclogher, who were then the county champions, and they beat them. And I think it was the first round. And if memory serves me correctly, that match was played at the athletic grounds in Armagh. So yeah, from Royer team, they'll take Chillick as a free hit.
We'll just touch on the quarterfinals. You've mentioned them throughout there, and with Trillick against Pomeroy, as you said, Eden Dork and Carrickmore, Donaghmore against Lochmacrory, and Ardal Cairn against Oma. So, what's the standout tie, or is there going to be an upset there? Or what are you most looking forward to?
Well, I'm probably most looking forward to, like, I think, as I said, Trillick will defeat Pomeroy more than likely, and Errigal Kieran will defeat Oma more than likely. So that leaves two games that are, that are very much in the balance. The Eden Dork Carrickmore tie and the Donaghmore v Lochmacrory tie. Those are two games, four teams that will fancy their chances of getting to the semi final and seeing how it goes from there. And obviously, the standout tie for me there is Donaghmore v Lochmacrory, because they are two teams who have really impressed in Tyrone over this past number of years. Lochmacrory for the fact that they have, they've consistently been up there near the top of the Division 1 table. Donaghmore, obviously, because they have such a wealth of underage talent coming through the ranks. Now, over the next maybe 5, 6, 7 years, if if things go well for either one of those two teams, they will fancy their chances of actually winning the O'Neill Cup. Whether that's 2025 or not, who knows? But this is a big chance for them to get to the semi-final. And when you get to the semi-final, maybe they meet the winners. Maybe they're drawn against the winners of Eden Dork and Carrickmore. Maybe Trillick and Errigal Kieran go into the other semi-final. Suddenly you're in a county final. So you never know. That's the intriguing thing about the Tyrone Championship and the open draw. It's exciting right from the start, and you don't have this situation where teams are playing for a third place finish in their group to get in as the best third place winners and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting.
And on just before we wrap up on Tyrone, I know you wanted to give a shout out to your own club, Borough. Got a win in the intermediate championship at the weekend too.
Yeah, and I wouldn't normally do it, but the amazing thing about this game, and I've watched a lot of football over the years, and we scored 5 goals in 5 minutes against Dunquin in the intermediate first round replay. Now, I don't know if I've ever seen 5 goals being scored in 5 minutes before. It was actually an amazing spell of football. Dunquin, who were just up from junior last year, they were dominating in the first quarter. Conor Owens, who was a member of the Tyrone under-20s last year that won the All-Ireland, he scored a couple of 2-pointers, and suddenly from being a situation where you're 6-1 down, you're suddenly 5-6 to 6 points ahead. So yeah, it was for a Barraman, it was a memorable win, but we'll take it and we'll look ahead now to the quarterfinals as well.
Good stuff, Alan. Brilliant. Thanks for your roundup of all things Tyrone, and no doubt we'll be keeping a close eye on the Tyrone Championship as we always do over the next few weeks. We'll be back shortly. We're going to take a quick break and have a word from our sponsors, Hastings Hotel, and then we'll be back with Mal McMahon and Niall Gartland in part 2, and we'll look at the rest of the county championships. So, Alan, thanks for coming on, and great to hear from you.
Thank you, Sean. Pleasure.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So we're back with part 2, and we have 7 other counties to look at. So a lot of football over the weekend and a lot to talk about on a Monday morning. So Mal, I'll come to you first for our Donegal roundup. How's things looking up there?
Donegal is down to 8 teams. I suppose the story of the weekend is St Eunan's were beaten. They were beaten by Tyrone, 116 to 18 points after extra time. The teams met in the group stages just the week before, and St Eunan's won. But there's controversy with this one. Enda McCormick fisted the ball over the bar to put Tyrone 2 points up. Reports are that they had 16 men on the pitch at the stage. one of them being McCormick himself, and John James Sweeney, who he was supposed to have replaced, was still on. So Glen versus Kilmacud Crook scenario, whereas this one, the person in question fists the point in the latter stages. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled to see if there's an appeal on the cards down there. So Shane O'Donnell got a point near the end, but Tyrone ended up winning the game, and huge result for them. St Eunan's heavily fancied, obviously a host of county players. Tyrone were 1-9 to 5 points up at half time. Ricky Gallagher with a goal, he lobbed Sean Patton. And I suppose, like a lot of games at the minute, and we're not going to go into rules here, but I think the 2 points is things definitely going to come up for debate. Every ground you go to, one dominates it. St Eunan's, who were without Conor O'Donnell Jr. on the day, and Niall O'Donnell had bits and pieces in extra time that he played. They came back into the game. Conor Senior, Shane O'Donnell, Owen McGeehan, the last two men scored 6 points between them. They were back level. I actually was watching this in the bar down in Letterkenny, and the buzz was good. They were starting to come back, and you felt that there's only going to be one winner because of the breeze, and I suppose St Eunan's were starting to find their feet. But as it turned out, a move broke down later on, and I think it was Aaron Reid fisted the equaliser to take it to extra time. So Tyrone had hit the crossbar. I think Bobby McGettigan had a shot come off the bar. So it was a frantic enough finish. I had to rush off for dinner. Didn't get to watch extra time. But as it turns out, that's whenever all the action came about. So we'll have to see. Ryan McFadden came on to score 3 points for Tyrone, who had won the league. And John James Sweeney had 3 points. But I suppose the story is Enda McCormick's winner. And will we have an appeal? Will we have the competition maybe put on hold? Who knows? But as it stands at the minute, a historic win for Tyrone over their neighbours. Four Masters, 15 to 18 points winners over Glen Swilly. Michael Murphy hasn't played a game in the championship at all, so I suppose that's the story coming out of Gary McDade's camp. Copper McFadden scored 6 points for Glen Swilly. It sort of all came down towards the end of the game, Sean. Richard O'Rourke put Four Masters, I think it was 2 points up, and then Owen Scott with a 2-pointer levelled it. And I suppose a host of these young players who we've watched playing colleges and underage and Donegal underage, they sort of, like Sen and Carr got a free for a breach to put them one up. Then Turlock Carr, his brother, he won a kick out, fed Kevin Muldoon for a point. And then Kevin Muldoon got a second point to sort of seal it. So 3 points in the last few moments. As I say, from a four-master team who are trying to break into that sort of top bracket in Donegal. So that they're through. Glen Swilly, they're out. The other games, Sean, McCool's were 2-16 to 17 point winners over Downings. It was a McCool side without Oisin Gallen, one of Ireland's top forwards. So Gary Wilson had to sort of hope that the rest of them stepped up to the mark. It was Conor McGinty. I saw him in action for Donegal under-20s. He scored 6 points, and Marty O'Reilly spoke to him before the game. He scored a goal, but it took a Chad McSorley goal right at the end to win it. Johnny McGrady had scored 6 points for Downings, who would have been underdogs going into this game. But as I say, for McCool's, who've sort of been tipped as maybe an outsider in this championship, and to score 2-16 without your top dog is a big achievement. Naomh Connell 3-15 to 2-10 winners over Killybegs. So I think it was they got an unanswered brace of 1-5 before half time, Sean, to go 2-9 to 2-4 up. Both goals coming from Shea Malone, and Jack McSharry and Rory Coyler got goals for Killybegs, but it was Brenton McDyer sort of took control of the game by all accounts, and then later on, I think Kevin McGettigan got the third goal. So I'm just going to run through the draw here. It's McCool's have St Michael's, Naomh Connell have Tyrone, Four Masters against last year's finalists Dunloe, and then Kilcar against Gweedore. And I'm hoping to be chatting now to Rona McNeilis now shortly, so we'll have a piece in Gaelic Life this week about Gweedore's sort of angle. But that's where we are in Donegal, Sean. 8 teams, but will we have an appeal? It's hard to tell, but when you have 2 men on the pitch at the end, one of them scores the equaliser, the point about them 2 up, there maybe is some sort of a case. So nothing's ever simple, is it?
Nothing's ever simple, Mal. Certainly not. Just on Monaghan, the final rounds of the group stages were played over the weekend, and the big result here was Cardiff getting one over Scottstown, and Cardiff. Seamus McEnany's team have been sort of challengers for the Monaghan Championship ever since they won the intermediate. I think that was 3 years ago, 2022. So they've been up, they've been challenging, but this is a huge win for them to actually beat Scottstown. I know they've had a couple of run-ins with them in the championship. They beat them in the league as well earlier on in the year, but to beat them in the championship is a huge victory for them. And they were actually 18-13 down with 7 minutes left, but Fergal Hanratty got two pointers, and Keith McEnany got the all-important goal. So a huge win for Cardiff, 117 to not 18. It sees them finish in second place in the group, and they, which means Scottstown come third. So the two of them are going through the playoffs. Clontarf topped that group, which is probably no surprise. They're unbeaten throughout the group stages. They beat Cromartin at the weekend 220 to not 19. Dean McDonald and Dar Hughes got the goals there. So they're straight through to the semi-finals, while Cardiff and Scottstown have to come through the playoffs. In Group 2 then, Enniskeane had already won all 4 of their games, so they were already top of the group and through to the knockout stages. Lawton grabbed second place. They beat Ballybay 2-9 to 13 points. Kieran Duffy and Aaron Mulligan grabbing the goals there. And Lawton will now play Scottstown in a knockout quarter-final, while Maher-Clune, they're also through to the knockout stages. They beat Ahmullen 2-16 to 16 points, and they're going to take on Cardiff in the next round. So a couple of huge ties to look forward to there. And obviously Scottstown have been the dominant force in Monaghan in the last 10 plus years. They've now drawn with Clontarf and tasted defeat against Cardiff. So maybe a changing of the guard slightly in Monaghan. But as I said, there's a lot of football to be played yet, and certainly wouldn't be writing off Scottstown just yet. Mal, I'll come back to you then with Antrim. I think Antrim's at the semi-final places now.
Yeah, we have semi-finals. We have Dunloy against Portnoe, and we have Cargan against Cregan. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. Dunloy 14-13 winners over St. Bridget's. Decky Smith with an impressive game at midfield. Aaron Crawford anchored their defence, and Keelan Loy had a couple of 2-pointers. St. Bridget's missed a few chances in the first half by reports. The Dunloy were 9-3 up at half-time. I spotted Jerome Quinn's highlights reel where Keelan Loy got a 2-pointer to make it 8-2. The umpire gave it as a wide, the referee gave it as a point, and then there's a bit of a deliberation, and then it stood. So it looked like a point from the footage. So that's where Dunloy were. I fancied them going into it, to be honest. Loads of talent. As Brenton McTaggart took to me at the weekend, if we ever took the big ball seriously, they would kill dead things. So, but obviously talent in both codes and making progress, and that's them into the last 4, where they'll play Portnoe, who were pushed very, very hard by St. Gall's. Portnoe 110 to 11-point winners. Jared O'Neill got a black card. I was reading Cahir had a piece this morning about it, where I think during that black card spell, Portnoe scored 6 points. So that seemed to be where the game was broken. Again, we're talking about the wind. St. Gall's were 8 points to a goal up at half-time. Aidan McAleese with the goal. Maybe a bit of controversy around it, where there's possibly a throw ball in the lead up to it, but the goal stood, and it ended up a significant score. St. Gall's, they roared back into the game. They created 3 or 4 goal chances. 2 of them were brilliantly saved by Kevin Mullen in the Portnoe goal. One from actually Niall Burns. It was a brilliant save. Like, he had no time to react, but he did. And say they were 8 points to 1 goal up at half time, and the goal ended up crucial. During the week, Portnoe lost a real club stalwart in Seamus McCarry, and the club won the under-16 championship during the week. They dedicated that to him, and obviously he was mentioned in dispatches after yesterday's game, and his son Martin would have played for Portnoe, so our thoughts with the family there. But that's Portnoe through. They're through to the semi-finals. Cargan 420 to 9-point winners over Ahayallen. Connor Johnson with 2-5. Mick McCann, Antrim's new selector, with 1-1. Hopefully, from Antrim's point of view, that he can sort of get all the players on board with the county. And Conor Johnson's a person I've been looking out for a long time now, since schools football. And like that, in 2022, they met in the final, and Cargan had an awful comeback to get the title. But this was one-sided, and reports are that Pete McGrath stepped down after as a Gallen manager, and Cargan, they still are on course for a fourth title. But Cregan will have something to say about that. They meet them in the semi-final, 115 to 110 winners over Rossa. They met in the league. Cregan won by 21 points, and Hugh McGettigan was hoping they would definitely make a fist of it. They did. Rory McCann with 1-6. They led 6 points to 4 at halftime. Rory McCann with 1-6 for Cregan, and Thomas Morgan, he scored a goal. They got 1-2 in stoppage time, but Cregan in control for most of it, and they play Cargan. So 4 left in Antrim. Is it going to be 4 in a row, or are we going to have somebody different? We'll have to see.
Now we'll come across to you for our Calvin roundup as well.
Yeah, Sean, 2 games ended up going ahead in Cavan over the weekend, and in theory 4 quarterfinals were down for decision, but the Kingscourt Ballyheas game was postponed due to bereavement, and Mullaghorn and Rammer didn't end up going ahead. I was reading Paul Fitzpatrick's report of why it was postponed, and he described it as a bit of a farce. The weather conditions at Kingspan Breathney ended up taking their toll, but I think initially there was lengthy deliberations, and then the game was delayed, and then green light was taken. The game to proceed at 5 o'clock, and then eventually it was called off. So it sounded like a frustrating afternoon for supporters anyway. And then the 2 games that did go ahead, Cusherlock, but then the champions, beat the Arva between 17 to 19 points. It wasn't straightforward though. And Arva had a great chance at 2-pointer later on, which would have left for a very nervy finish. Arva really grew into the game, and on reflection, they've had a really strong championship, and will take great heart into it going into next year. Another game, Gown have a habit of finding a feet in the knockout rounds, and maybe that's going to be the case again, because they were full value for the winning the Cavan games. They won by 122 to 11 points, So Gown will be disappointed by the fact that not only did they not retain the title last year, but they didn't make the final either, So might be a burning desire within Gowna to make it back to the final, So it'll be interesting to see if they can overtake Crushlock and Rammer in the coming weeks, Always potentially Rammer get on against Mullaghorn in the rescheduled game, So yeah, still a lot to play for in Calvin with those 2 games still to be played, Sean.
Yeah, it's the same sort of situation with Down. There was only 2 games went ahead at the weekend. They usually have one on a Monday night anyway, but I think Drumgaff and Ballyholden didn't go ahead at the weekend, so it's been played tonight as well. So the 2 games that did go ahead, Lough Island beat Breda by 1 point, not 16 to 112. I think it was a late Breda goal, sort of closed the gap by the end of the game, but Lough Island comfortably through to the quarterfinals, and so are Glen. They beat Castlewellan 114 to 011. Glen back-to-back championship semi-finalists in the last couple of years, so they're back into the last 8, and they'll be pushing to get back to the semi-finals as well. So there's 2 games on the Monday night, Drumgaff and Ballyholden, as I mentioned. It's in Burren this evening, and Clonduff against Downpatrick is also in Park Island Uri. So those are the last 2 round 3 games, with all 4 sides trying to get through to the quarterfinals, and we'll know more after this evening. The draw for the quarterfinals should take place, and we'll know more then about the lay of the land sort of in Down. Well, we'll come to Derry then. I don't know, Derry's at the final stages as well.
Yeah, a very underwhelming weekend in Derry, to be honest. The story was Banagher, relegated in the league. They were 118 to 17 point winners over Dungiven, and that's Dungiven who beat Newbridge in the first round. Obviously, there's a backdoor in Derry. Tierna Moore with 9 points. Oisin Feeney with his 3rd goal of the championship in 2 games, actually. And they had the breeze in the first half, but you sort of worried they weren't going to make enough use of it. Dungiven started fairly sharply. They had 3 points on the board. They were 3-1 up with Conor Murphy with a couple of scores. But just before halftime, everything sort of changed when it was 5 points all Tiernan Moore kicked an important 2-point score, and then he made the goal for Oisin Finney, and they led at half time and were in a really good situation. Then in the second half, Dungiven, Fintan Murphy kicked a couple of 2-point scores. They got it back to 3 points. They forced a turnover in defence at a stage. They won an important kick out, and you felt maybe would the legs maybe they were maybe a wee bit fresher. Would that count? But Tiernan Moore added an insurance point, and they're through to beat Glen now. And great scenes at the end. The Banagher players coming down the tunnel, got relegated, lost to Glen in the first round, back-to-back wins, and so that was probably the main story of the weekend. The first game yesterday at Owen Begg was probably the biggest advertisement you could have for getting rid of the 2-point arc. Lavey were 120 to 5-point winners over Kilrea. They led by 16 points to 0 at half time. They actually changed their team just before throw-in based on winning the toss. They decided that if they won the toss, if they had the breeze, they would play with Louis Reagan at full forward. And if they went against it, they would stay with Jimmy Dugan. So they changed it to even suit. But they were very good with the breeze. They had big men across the middle. They stopped Kilrea's kick out. And Kilrea had actually, I think, had only 3 shots in the first half. Whereas Lavey had six 2-pointers in the first half, 16 points from 13 shots. Really, really efficient. And Niall Toner scored 111 in all. Let's say 16-0 at half time. Toner's goal shortly into the second half. And Lavey were able to play both sides of it. They were able to play possession with Kieran Henry again, very prominent for them. And there was no way back for Kilrea. Like at stage, Kilrea were down to 13 players for the last 10. James Keake got a second booking, and Rory Maguire picked up a black card. So just it was just dominated by the breeze. But Lavey, to be fair, they were disappointing against Magherafelt. But yesterday they were methodical in the first half, knew what they were doing, and then in the second half they were fairly composed in possession. On Saturday, Newbridge, who went through the back door, the reigning champions, they haven't gone away. They were 125 to 1-4 winners over Loup. Loup were, I wasn't at this game, Loup were 1-4 to 0 ahead and then didn't score for the rest of the game. Newbridge scored 125 in a row. And that was without Callum McGrogan, who picked up an injury in the last game. The Doherty brothers scored 113 between them. Oisin 17, Connor 3, Mark 3, Shawnee Young with 4 points. James Gribben, their goalkeeper from last year, who had an injury, he came on with in the latter stages. I'm not sure just when. So he's back to full fitness again, which is another option for them. They play Steelstown in the quarterfinals, and as I say, they lost their first game, but they're very much contenders, and 125 is a ruthless enough display. Balahi were 220 to 311 winners over Faughan Vale. I wasn't at this game, Sean, but Damon Gallagher hit 1-9 for Balahi. Oisin McAlean got the other goal. They were without Paul Cassidy. By reports, Peter Cassidy had a great game at midfield for the Tones. And they play Magherafelt now in the quarterfinals. Lavey play Slaughtneil. Owen McElhinney, Shane McElhinney, and Jude Bryson got the goals for Faughan Vale. I think 2 of them late on, and Balahi were probably commanding winners. And I suppose to do it, Sean, without your county player is impressive. But I suppose it was just a disappointing weekend overall. Probably just the spark was at the end with Banagher, and even their celebrations, and the fact that a relegated team are now in the last 8, albeit they're playing the All-Ireland champions from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we'll just finish off Armagh then. They had their quarter-final playoffs at the weekend, and we now know the quarter-final draw. So I suppose Saturday's games, there was an upset. St Peter's beat Cullaville by a point. St Peter's trailed by 7 points. Just before half-time, Cullaville hit the net twice in the first half. Oisin O'Neill and Ryan Duffy raised the green flags there. St Peter's weren't playing well. I'm sure they would admit that themselves, giving away loose turnovers, just not at themselves. And they were 7 down at one stage, but there was a black card shown to Cullaville's Gavin McVeary just before half time, which gave probably about 8-9 minutes of the second half. St Peter's were going to have an extra man, and they made full use of it. They went and they struck, I think it was 6 points on the bounce, led by Niall McConville, would have been in round the county squad for a couple of years. He was absolutely excellent. He's usually the top scorer, and he was top scorer again for St. Peter's, but it was his work rate all over the field. He was immense, and he dragged them back into the game himself. Rory McDonald and James Moore, who ended up getting the winning point, were all superb. So that was St. Peter's through. Then on Saturday evening, Carrick-Cruppen beat Greenmore by a goal, and again it was a card here that sort of turned the tide. Greenmore lost their goalkeeper, PJ Quinn, to a red card, and they had been in front at that stage, but Carrick-Cruppen come back into it. Then I think it was 8 points to 1-2 when the red card was shown, and again Carrick-Cruppen just went in a bit of a scoring spree, and they ended up winning 110 to 10 points. Owen Woods' first half goal, proving the difference in the end there. Sunday then was a double header at Box Athletic Grounds, and probably both games didn't live up to the pre-match hype. Cleavey were excellent against Mullabon and ended up winning by 10 points. And it's worth noting for Cleavey that their first 10 shots all were 10 scores, not a single wide from the first 10 shots. So that sort of gives you the overview of how this game went from a Cleavey attacking point of view. Joe McCann, he really carried the fight for Mullabon by himself at times. 1-4 he scored, but it wasn't enough to keep them in the game. Cleavey were awesome in front of the posts, and a few young players. I think Aaron McGuinness scored 4 points. I think he's still a teenager. He's only maybe 18 years of age. Fergal Boylan as well scored 1-6. Keelan McDonald, Steve McDonald's son, he scored 2 points as well. So them young boys are all scoring well, but the more important thing is they're keeping the older boys on the bench, and the likes of Micheál McNamee, Ronan McGuinness, Niall McGuinness, who would have been the main men in the Cleavey forward line down through the years, they're now coming off the bench. So huge squad depth for Cleavey, and a huge quarter final coming up as well, which I'll touch on at the end. The final game of the weekend then was Madden against the Harps, and again this certainly didn't live up to expectation. I think most people would have fancied Madden to come through, but not by the landslide victory they had. They ended up winning 0-25 to 1-8, which I don't think anybody saw coming. And in the first 15 minutes, the Harps were really, they certainly put Madden under pressure. They got a brilliant goal, John Daly's long kick out, went right over the top of the Madden press, a bit Sean Patton-esque. It failed to Ryan McShane, who played through Tom O'Kane, and he tucked away the goal brilliantly, got right into the bottom corner. And the Harps led 1-5 to 6 points after 17 minutes and didn't score again for a long time. I think it was nearly half an hour before they got a score. And in that time, Madden hit 14 points in a row, 9 before the break, and then 5 after half time. The likes of Joe Sheridan, Dara McMullen, now Grimley, Connor Grimley, their whole half back line all got 2 points apiece. Oisin O'Hara, Donal Harvey, and Niall Smith all come up and got 2 points apiece. So this was really dominant from Madden. The Harps would have been disappointed. It was their third championship defeat from 4 games this year, and they didn't pose the challenge that many people thought they would, but it was still 25 points is some kicking for Madden, and they'll carry that confidence into the quarterfinals, which they face Mahary in the quarterfinal. Cross McGlen take on Carrick-Cruppen. Clonard, as I mentioned, take on Cleavey in what will be a hugely anticipated game, while St. Peter's, they're taking on Cullyhanna. So all to play for in Armagh and all to play for right across the province of Ulster. That's 8 counties. We're only after rounding up, so much football going on, but we're coming into the knockout stages now, and we're heading very closely on the way to Ulster Club Championship, which will just be around the corner. So we'll be back on Thursday, folks. We'll have another feature podcast, and then of course we'll be back next Monday, and we'll look back at whatever club championship games take place over that weekend. So thanks to Alan Rodgers earlier on for coming on. Thanks to Mal and Niall for tuning in and giving us a roundup of their counties. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll chat to you all on Thursday.
Thank you, Sean.